I'm Meredith Gurley Johnson, Executive Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Georgia. I'm a proud double dog, and I'm honored to serve in this role, working with UGA's incredible graduates. At the University of Georgia, learning doesn't end when the diploma arrives on the wall. We're a community of lifelong learners committed to continued growth and into inquiring into the nature of things. We are spirited and passionate between the hedges and between the pages. We're curious, we're open-minded, and we're ready to explore new worlds and voices. The UGA Alumni Association strives to develop diverse programming that will help to connect over 327,000 alumni around the world with their fellow alumni to UGA. This new virtual book club, Between the Pages, provides an opportunity to enjoy and discuss works by alumni authors with fellow Bulldogs. And I'm pleased to welcome you to our very first book club event. Mary Kay Andrews is the New York Times best-selling author of 27 novels, including the summer classics Sunset Beach, The High Tide Club, and Summer Rental, and one cookbook. A native of St. Petersburg, Florida, she earned a bachelor's in journalism in 1976 from UGA and spent 14 years as a newspaper reporter. In 1991, she left journalism to write fiction and penned 10 critically acclaimed mysteries under her real name, Kathy Hogan Trocheck, before assuming her pen name and turning to women's fiction in 2002. Her 40-plus year collaboration with her high school sweetheart has yielded 2 grown children, 2 adorable grandchildren, and countless memories in the kitchen. Welcome, Mary Kay Andrews. Veteran television journalist and broadcaster Monica Kaufman Pearson became the first African evening newscast when she debuted on WSB TV in 1975. She spent almost 40 years as WSB TV's Channel 2 Action News anchor and garnered 33 local and regional Emmy Awards over the course of her reporting. Since her retirement in 2012, Pearson has gone on to host a weekly radio show and to earn a master's degree in journalism in mass communication at UGA in 2014. She's married to John E. Pearson Sr., has a daughter, Claire Patrice DeVoe, and a stepson, John Pearson. Monica will lead a discussion with Mary Kay for 20 minutes or so, and then afterwards there will be a time for you to submit questions. So be thinking about what you'd like to ask and be ready to type your question into the Q&A section when it is turned on later in the program. So Monica, go ahead and proceed with leading our discussion with Mary Kay.
Thank you very much, Meredith, and I am so looking forward to talking with Mary Kay. That's the first question to you, Mary Kay. How did you become Mary Kay? Does this have anything to do with Mary Kay Cosmetics?
Not in the least. I had been writing mysteries under my real name and had an idea for a different kind of a book. And since it wasn't a mystery, I thought I'll write it under a pseudonym. Because, you know, genre readers are very brand conscious. They only want you to write one thing. And so I decided the pseudonym would be a combination of my children's names. My daughter Katie is Mary Kathleen, and my son is Andrew. And then the other tricky part of that was, you know, my married name is Trocheck, and so fiction is shelved alphabetically. So when I was writing as Trocheck, I was down here on the floor. And I thought, if I'm going to change my name, I want to be up here. Because most of my readers are women, and women, we don't want to squat to look for a book.
You don't want your tush up in the air if you're not squatting either.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about how you come up with your plots. What ignites these ideas on these great summer classics?
You know, the ideas come from everywhere. I joke, but it's actually the truth. I get a lot of ideas in the shower. You know, if I am stuck, sometimes I'll just go get in the shower. I think it's sensory deprivation. There's nothing else going on. You know, it's the water and you're just everywhere. The plot for Hello Summer, my editor asked me to write a book set at a newspaper, which, you know, was my background, although I haven't worked in newspapers in almost 30 years. So I wanted to write about a small town paper, an editor, a reporter who goes from working for a big city paper, actually the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, my last news job, and she has to go home to her family's struggling weekly paper. So I knew I was going to do that, but I needed a big juicy story for Conley, my protagonist, to really get her teeth into. And you know, when she goes home to this little town in the Florida Panhandle, she says nothing ever happens there. So I had to think about, you know, what would be a juicy story, and I thought, okay, a political scandal. And I have always been a big newspaper reader, and I've always read obituaries. And I read an obituary in my hometown paper about a congressman, a longtime congressman in Florida, who at his funeral, his son stood up to give the eulogy and mentioned his father's secret first family. And so that's where the idea for the plot of Hello Summer came from. It happened that my oldest childhood friend, we'd been friends since first grade, he was the obituary writer for the Tampa Bay Times. And he did a series of stories about this very startling revelation that this longtime congressman had ended his 35-year marriage with his wife of 35 years, 4 kids. He'd married his high school sweetheart. He'd gone off to Congress and got one of his aides pregnant.
So that was literally taken right out of an obituary and a headline.
Yeah, but the ideas, you know, the ideas come from everywhere. There are characters in Hello Summer who literally walked out of a newsroom. People, you know, they're based on people I work with or knew over the years.
Now, let's be honest here. Rowena,
Yes.
the Joene, is she, as I think, probably patterned after Yolande Gwynn, who used to be at the AJC?
Yes, definitely. I sat next to Yolande Gwynn. She was the grande dame of Atlanta society, and she was a character and a half. And I sat next to her when I first joined the features department at the AJC. And after a few months of sitting next to her, I just thought someday I'm going to write a character based on Yoli.
And she was perfect. But you also have a character in the book that is a real person. And please tell the people who are listening the story about Michael Torpy, because his dad is an unbelievable columnist for the AJC, and Michael died very young.
Yeah, I never met Michael, I don't think, but Michael attended the same parochial school in Decatur that my kids and grandkids attended. And Bill and I, he was coming on to the staff at the AJC when I was leaving, but I'd met him on a couple of different occasions, and I'm a huge fan of his work. I think Michael Torpy is Atlanta's Mike Royko. I don't know if people know who Mike Royko was, but Mike Royko was a take no prisoners columnist for the Chicago Tribune for many, many years. And Bill is from Chicago. I was just writing, and I had this young, right out of journalism school, redheaded reporter, and I had read Bill's very moving columns about his son. And so I emailed him and I said, is it okay if I name a character after him? And he very graciously agreed that it would be okay.
Oh, and he is such a good character in the book and helps to bring the newspaper into the 21st century.
We're going to need all those whippersnapper young, right out of J school people to drag our business kicking and screaming into this next world.
And that's one of the things you do talk about in the book is the decline of newspapers and conglomerates coming in and buying them up, and how important it is to still have a small town newspaper. Talk about that.
Well, you know, I am such a huge believer in good print journalism, all kinds of journalism, but community journalism is just vital. And it does the things that big chains can't do. It's not just a matter of reporting the high school football scores, which is important, But if we don't have newspapers kicking rocks as Conley does in Hello Summer, and attending school board meetings and city council meetings, all those things that the big papers can't and won't cover, then we will lose. We need to have people accountable.
So what do you love about being an author versus what you love about being a journalist?
Well, I miss the immediacy. I'm sure you do too, Monica,
Yes.
of daily journalism. When the fire bell rings, we just want to go running off, and if we did run off, we wouldn't know where to go anymore. But I miss the immediacy. I miss having a front row seat to what's happening in our world. That I miss.
Mm-hmm.
I don't miss the endless stupid meetings. I don't miss committees deciding what can and can't happen. I don't, when I was working, as I said, it's been almost 30 years. When I worked at the AJC, we still wore hose and heels.
Oh yeah,
and
that's changed.
Yeah, the male reporters wore sport coats, and they didn't necessarily wear their tie, but they had one. It might have been on the back of their chair, but they had one. I don't miss the stuff that's meaningless. I miss the incredible sense of comradeship. Sitting in a group, sitting in a big newsroom, if you couldn't find a word, you'd turn to the guy next to you and say, "Hey, what's that word?" Or you could read a sentence to somebody and say, "Does this work for you?" Or you could crack a joke, and your colleagues would maybe laugh.
That brings me to what you do with your book when you're in the process of writing it. First of all, where do you do your writing?
Oh, that's a leading question. I have a very nice office. You can see my bookcases in back of me. I have a very nice office. I never write there. I am a Leo, and I love the sunlight. I follow the sun around my house. But since the pandemic, I've been writing in bed, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning.
And so you're in bed how long writing?
I usually till about 10 o'clock. I go downstairs and get my Diet Coke. I don't drink coffee. That's my caffeine. And we have a sunroom downstairs with a big cushy sofa, and I write there. Sometimes I'll write on my back porch, but I almost never write in my office.
Now, in this book, you have not only the newspaper stuff, but you've also got a lot of police investigative work. You've never been a policeman, although you've been a police reporter.
Yeah.
What other people do you involve in the preparation of your book and preparing you to make sure that everything's correct?
I still do. I think, and that's one of the things my journalism training is invaluable for. When you're a journalist, you think nothing of calling up a perfect stranger and asking them really nosy questions. So I have a friend who's a former Atlanta homicide cop. We've been friends for a long time, and I'll call him and ask him questions, or I'll email him questions. For this book, there's a car fire. Conley comes across a car fire early in the plot of the book, and I didn't know about that. So fortunately, the Decatur Fire Department near us has got incredible leadership, all female leaders there. Monica, how cool is that?
Yes.
And they're Black women too, which I think is so amazing. So they were so helpful, telling me this is what happens, this is a procedure. And then, there's a question about how the man in that car fire, how he actually dies, what's his cause of death. So I called up various friends. I have a friend who's a judge in Gwinnett County, and he helped me connect me with the coroner in Gwinnett County, who's a woman, and she was incredibly helpful. I went out to the Gwinnett County coroner's office and did research, talked to her and her staff. They very kindly invited me to view an autopsy, which I declined.
I don't blame you.
Thank you, but no thank you. But it's amazing how much research, to make so much work goes into one sentence just to make sure that it's believable. And I always say it doesn't have to be possible, it just has to be plausible.
Well, Buddy is quite the character. The man in black who is so mysterious. You know, you're wondering, is there a DJ out there that you know who fits that pattern?
No, you know, the man in black is actually inspired by a photographer I worked with at my first job out of college at the Savannah Morning News. There was a photographer, and his name was Bob Morris, and he called himself the man in black. He always dressed in black. He had a white Corvette, and he had a homemade tag on the front that said working press. And he would get off, I worked 2 to 11, my first job. He'd get off work at 11 o'clock, and he would drive the streets of Savannah looking for car fires or looking for breaking news. So he was the inspiration for Buddy. And the other inspiration for Buddy was a little bit, now that I think about it, I hadn't thought about it before. Part of it was, you know, the DJ in American Graffiti.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I never even thought about it until you asked me about it, but that was part of it. And then when I was doing research, I was in Fairhope, Alabama, and their community radio station is right downtown in Fairhope with a big picture window, and the DJs there and the newscasters are part of the community, and people can walk by and see them. And so that's where that part of the book that part of Buddy came from.
And Lorraine is such a strong character. You know, she is a Southern grandmother, but she's not the kind of grandmother we would expect to be in a small town. She really stands up for Sarah Conley.
She does. And the newspaper, her family, the newspaper has come down through her family. And so she has very strong ideas about what it should be and what it should do, and the paper's responsibility to the community. And, you know, a little bit about, I think a little of that, I think about, you know, strong female journalists like Catherine
Graham. Mm-hmm.
Catherine Graham, who had this iron will. And so a little bit of that maybe was inspired by Catherine Graham. But yeah, Lorraine is her own woman, and she does not suffer fools.
But Conley also is extremely strong, bringing big city ideas to a small town, at the same time rubbing her sister the wrong way, restarting a romance. She's very complicated and very real.
Yeah, I didn't understand Conley when I first started writing her. And the sister, who is the managing editor of the paper, was originally going to be a brother. He was going to be Garrett. And my editor, who has very strong opinions on things, said to me, no, I want it to be a sister. And I want this to be a complicated sibling, a sister story. And I had 2 sisters. I was the middle of 3 sisters. And I'd always shied away from writing sister relationships because it was too close to home, you know? But, and so it was tricky for me. But I really towards the end, I thought, okay, now I understand Grace, and I understand who she is and why she's so cranky, because she had to go home and run the family business while her sister got to go off and pursue her dream.
And the thing is, Conley feels that her sister has, until she finds out that the 2 are separated, that, you know, she's looking at her sister and thinking she's got the perfect romance.
Yeah, she does think that.
And then when you look at Conley and how she really does dig her teeth into trying to find out what happened to Mr. Robinette, that is really good. I love that investigative part.
You know, I was afraid I would turn readers off, making her too aggressive and too, you know, in your face. But I finally had to think, you know, this is who she is. And either my readers hate her, or they'll stay around and see her character arc, because she changes over the course of the book. her personality changes. She comes to understand some stuff about herself and about her family. And so if she stayed the same all the way through the book, if she just didn't care and if she pushed herself, and, you know, she does run over some people, and just, you know, especially when she first starts talking to Scully, she's pretty insensitive to his concerns, and that's on purpose. I don't want to create a character who's two-dimensional and too perfect and too, oh, okay, well, never mind, I won't do that.
How important was romance in this? Because you know, this is considered a summer book, so there's got to be some romance in it. How do you balance the mystery and the romance?
I think you do it sort of, you know, I love to cook. I think you're a dedicated home cook too. Honestly, I think it's like making a sauce. You know, you're making the sauce, and then you think, oh, this needs a little acid, or this needs a little heat. Let me throw some heat up in here. And let me throw some bumps in the way. You know, things can't go too smoothly. So
go ahead.
No, I sort of think about it that way.
Well, the other thing that surprised me, and I don't want to give it away, I'm hoping everyone who's online has finished the book, but how can I do this without giving it away? The fight scene at the end was I did not see that coming.
I didn't see it coming either. I had no idea. You know, people who write fiction refer to themselves as two kinds of writers. There's the plotter, the person who plots it all out and has a detailed outline and synopsis and a storyboard. You know, I wish I could storyboard. I can't. I've tried. I'm a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants. And I thought, how am I going to resolve all of this? What's going to happen? And so, and I knew Buddy. I didn't know what Buddy's role was in this book exactly, but as I got towards the end of the book, I had this idea that Buddy had a part to play. He wasn't just window dressing.
And his history, you know, I'm still trying to figure out who was calling him at the radio station and telling him they knew who he was. Oh, you have all these little mysteries in there.
I'm trying to think who it was.
You didn't tell us.
There's an answer to that question, Monica, but you know, I'm 225 pages down the road in next summer's book.
Already?
Oh yeah, my next summer's book is due in October.
So and I don't want to give it away, but then I do want you to give it away. Is Conley going to be in this book, or is there a new character?
No, it's a new set of characters, and I just remembered who it is that's calling and saying, "I know who you are." It's somebody who recognizes him, that listened to him.
Out of town.
Yeah, who just happens to be in Florida listening to the radio, and he hears Buddy, and he remembers that the Buddy's passed.
Yes, but I thought maybe that was someone else, even though, you know, I was like,
no,
I was getting
into listener. It was a listener who
just a listener. Yeah. Okay, see, I thought there was more to that listener. You know, I'm kind of putting them in the plot. What was the most difficult thing about writing this book?
Getting it, you know, putting all the pieces together, figuring out the plot, who done it, because I didn't know. There's a congressman who is found dead in his car. I alluded to the car crash. It wasn't just a car crash. I knew that. I knew he didn't just like die, but I had to figure out how and why and the motive, and that was really, really tricky. And figuring out how to save a newspaper was incredibly tricky, because I didn't want that newspaper to go under. And you know, the more I learned about all the challenges facing newspapers everywhere, I mean, I knew it a little bit, but so that was tricky. How do I write a plot where it's believable that this paper can keep going.
What I also like in your writing, you have little details that mean a lot. For instance, Felicity Street. Felicity meets happiness.
Yeah.
And on that street, you had, in the end, everyone was happy.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that, Monica. Thank you. You make me seem smarter than I actually am.
I'm reading more into this, I think, than is necessary, but I so enjoyed it. Who is your average reader?
I think like us. I mean, I hope that my demographic is anybody who loves a good story, a good beach read, which means it's a page turner. The characters are characters that you root for and that you relate to. There's a romance, they like that. And a little bit of a mystery, and then an escape. I am an unabashed escape read, and I am happy to tell my readers, come on in. I'm going to take you for a ride. We're going to have a great time. And when we pull up to the curb, you're going to get out of that book and you're going to go, oh, let's go again.
So who do you read?
I read a lot of different people. Right now, I'm reading a lot. I'm part of a group of authors that do a Wednesday night Facebook Live to Zoom to Facebook Live. So I'm a huge fan of Eleanor Lipman, who writes rom-com. I love her work. I'm still a mystery buff. I like Michael Conley, and he's an old former newspaper reporter. He worked at the LA Times. I'm reading Jasmine Guillory right now, who we had as a guest last night. Her latest book is Party of Two. And one of my favorite authors, we share the same editor. Her name is Catherine Senner, and her new book is What You Wish For. She writes rom-com, romantic comedy, for those people who know what that is. I love historic fiction, love it. So The Nightingale completely blew me away. Yeah, and so I'm kind of all over the map, and I like some nonfiction too. I'm planning to go get the Mary Trump book.
I've already ordered it on Amazon, waiting for it. And I just finished Bolton's book.
Yeah, I wasn't going to give Bolton my money. I want to read it, but I don't want to give him my money.
Well, what you do is you just go get it dirt cheap on Amazon, then you don't feel so bad.
Yeah. But, I really like to support independent booksellers when I can.
Yes, that makes sense.
Independent booksellers have a lot to do with my success, with my career, and so I really try very hard to. And there's so many wonderful independent bookstores. We're lucky in the Atlanta area.
That's true. Well, you also have themes within your book that are very contemporary. For instance, the role of journalism when it goes past the surface and really digs deep. Is that on purpose that you include those kinds of things that are contemporary and make people think?
I hope so. Yeah, I'm not a crusader. I don't want to. You can go read somebody else for crusading. But this happens to be something I believe in, and I believe in, on a more personal level with my characters. They can make terrible mistakes. I believe in forgiveness and redemption. I'm Catholic, so that's. I
am too. I didn't know you were Catholic also.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I believe in that, and I want to forgive my characters when my characters do something bad. Generally, unless they're just a horrible, there's a very bad character in Hello Summer.
Yes.
And he is a bad guy, and he gets his just desserts. We'll just say that.
And I was so glad when he did. I will admit I was shocked when he showed up, where he showed up, but I was glad Buddy was there.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I have a very strong sense of right and wrong, and I'm not one of these authors who likes to see the bad guy get away with something. Now, there are characters in this book who bear responsibility for this crime, they don't go to prison, but they bear their own they bear their own judgment. You know what I'm saying? They
Yes.
sometimes justice isn't prison. Sometimes justice is having to live with knowing what you've done. Sometimes justice is losing what you had. And sometimes justice is walking around understanding that you've done the unforgivable.
Well, Toddy, is that her name, or is it Toddy? The wife,
Toddy, Toddy, yes.
the ex-wife. I kind of had a feeling that she had something to do with.
No, now don't. Now, Monica.
I'm not going to say. I'm not going to. But I really you kind of gave it away.
Oh.
But then I live with a policeman, so you learn to look for the characters, the suspects. But it's interesting. I didn't feel she really got her comeuppance.
I think for her, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but
Yes.
I was okay with where I left her.
Because after all, he had treated her badly. The senator. Yeah, he had treated her badly.
Yeah. And I was okay with where I left her.
And tell me about Winnie.
Winnie.
Lorraine's better part. Winnie was very interesting because you think of her as just being a housekeeper, and even her small character is developed, and you find out how much depth she had and angst she had.
Yeah, I had read this amazing story in Atlanta magazine about a cancer cluster down in Waycross. And, these cancer clusters lots of times happen in low income neighborhoods, and they happen to people. And that one was caused by toxic waste left by a power plant down there. And then I read some more stories when I was researching of there was a cancer cluster in Birmingham, a horrible one and it was in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and the soil, the water, everything was contaminated, and that was by the railroad. And so when I was reading about those, I thought that's Winnie. Winnie and her sister grew up in a mill town that was, contaminated, and her sister dies of cancer. And Winnie is never able to have children.
Yeah.
And so she's sort of the conscience. She's sort of the conscience of the book. She's the choir.
Yeah. I loved her. I loved her quietness. Well, we're going to take some questions now from the audience, because I could just talk to you all day about this book. And one thing you said is very true. When I started it, it was like, okay, I'll split it up over days, but I didn't do that. I binged read because I wanted to know what was going to happen next, particularly also with Skelly and I still want to call her Sarah, like her grandmother, and the old folks in the town. But it really was a very easy read, but a read that had a lot of stuff to it that you could really bite on, and that for me, who likes to read biographies and autobiographies, books like that, this was the perfect break for me. So thank you. Thank you. I can't wait to read your next one. So now we're going to take some questions. I have a couple on here. The first question is, what was the significance of the neighbor hearing the voices the night of the accident?
So many people have asked me that. That was a red herring. That was just a clue. That was just something to throw you off so that you thought someone else had done it. It was a red herring.
Okay.
But I can't believe how many people caught that, and people have emailed me and messaged me. What was it? It was just drunks coming back from the bar.
Oh, so that's all it was.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so funny. Another question. If you had to pick just one of your books to recommend to us other than Hello Summer, which would it be?
I'm really proud. Well, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for just a lot of laughs, hissy fit, I tell people that's the gateway drug to my books. Hissy fit is, that's a popular one. If you're looking for a romantic story, I wrote a book called Spring Fever, and it's about a young woman who falls in love. Her high school, her girlhood crush, she marries him, and they split up. And she goes to his wedding to convince herself she's over him, and realizes she's not over him. But a book I'm really proud of was from 2 years ago, and it's called The High Tide Club. And it's a multi-generational story, takes place on a fictional barrier island off the coast of Georgia. And I'm real proud of that one.
Okay.
I'll send you that one, Monica. I want to make sure you
to read it. I'd like to read that. And that brings up the question from Peyton. She says, curious, what town is Silver Bay supposed to be in the Florida Panhandle?
Well, it's a fictional town. At first, I thought it was going to be set in the Alabama Gulf Coast. And then I thought, well, not enough people understand, because I have readers all over the country and in Germany too, other countries. I thought not enough people know there is a Gulf Coast in Alabama. So I'm going to move it down the road to the Panhandle. It's not any place as chic as 30A.
Mm-hmm.
It's somewhere between Panama City and Destin. It's off the beaten path, and I made it up.
Okay. Anna wants to know, is there a character you have created that you relate to the most?
Let me think. Well, when I wrote Savannah Breeze, that's about an antique dealer, and I'm an antique buff. And so Wheezy, I wrote 4 books with Wheezy Foley, Savannah Blues, Savannah Breeze, Blue Christmas, and Christmas Bliss. So, but there's some of my DNA in all my protagonists.
Okay. Here's another question. Did you ever get to a point while writing where you feel like the book is done, or it just complete enough that you tell yourself you have to stop editing and writing?
Well, my editor has to tell me that. No, I mean, I blow deadlines. It's hard to believe I was ever a newspaper reporter and that I made daily deadlines. I always blow my deadlines, and I'm always cutting it so close. And I always feel like there was so much. I always think, oh God, I could have done it so much better if I'd had more time, if I'd been smarter, if I'd been a better writer. I'm never, ever satisfied with the finished product.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
This viewer says, I've heard Sue Grafton was a mentor to you. I miss her books, and that we didn't get Z. Any interest in writing Z?
I would never presume to try to pick up the Sue Grafton mantle. I met her, I took a writer's workshop at Antioch College in Ohio in 1990. And I went to this workshop. It was a week-long workshop because she was teaching mystery writing, and she was very gracious to me. I had a manuscript conference with her, and at the end of the conference, she said, "You're ready to be published." And she was so generous and so gracious. She we would go out drinking or have dinner with her. And when I got my first book contract, actually after I got home from the workshop, I wrote her a thank you note. Now this is where Southern manners come in. Always write your thank you notes. I wrote her a thank you note and said, "Thank you so much. You were so generous and so inspiring." And then when I got my first book contract, I wrote her and I said, "You were an inspiration to me," and told her thank you. And she wrote me back. And so when it came time to get cover quotes for my first novel, I told my publisher, I want to ask Sue Grafton. They said, "Oh, no, Sue Grafton is not going to give a cover quote to a first-time novelist." And they said they would not ask her. Usually the process is your publisher asks a famous author for a quote. And I said, "Well, okay, but I'm going to ask her." And she did give me a cover quote. And whenever she would come back in through Atlanta on book tour, I would make a point to go see her. And we got to go to dinner a couple of times. So yeah, she was an amazing, amazing lady. And the other big influence on my career was Celestine Sibley.
Yes, who was unbelievable. She's a wonderful columnist. To some of the young people who are listening, you should pull up her books and also look at some of her columns. Great writer. Great
She helped me
writer.
get my first publishing contract.
Oh my. Well, I understand. You should tell our viewers how that occurred, because you were writing this book while you were still working for the AJC.
Yeah, I had a group of, there were 2 or 3 of us in the newsroom back in the late 80s, and we all wanted out of newspapers. I wanted, not because I hated newspapers, I wanted to go home because I had 2 little kids. I wanted to be home when they got home from school. So I started writing in secret. And Celestine was a great friend to me. We would go to lunch at the Magnolia Room at Rich's. This was when the paper was downtown, right? And just, she was one of the unforgettable characters. If you ever get to meet someone like that in your life, you're a lucky person. And she knew I was writing in secret, and she was very supportive. And I didn't have a computer at home. I would go back to the paper at night. Which is against company policy. And I would write on my computer, and then I would print it out and take it home. And I did that for a year. And then I finished my first book. And she had a rule against ever reading anybody else's manuscript, but she broke her rule for me. She sent my manuscript to her editor at HarperCollins. And her editor was a dear friend of hers, and I'd met him. And he subsequently gave me my first book contract.
But I understand the way you got there was on the newspaper's dime.
Yes. Yes, and I am not ashamed of it. Her editor had said, well, you should come to New York and we'll talk about this book that you've submitted. So I came up with a story idea. I came up with an idea to do a story about how they put the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade together. So that was at the time when papers were flush with money and they would send you anywhere. And so they said, yeah, sure, go on up to New York. And yeah, you can write a story about the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, how they build the floats, all of that. And I did that. They build the floats in a warehouse in Hoboken, by the way. And then when I got done with all my reporting, I went over to HarperCollins and met with them, and they offered me a 2-book contract. But so, yeah, I totally did it on the paper's dime, and I'm proud of it.
Well, the other question that's come up, how does your life as a UGA student inform your fiction?
Well, it's been so long. I still cheer for the red and black. Probably the relationships I made at Georgia, especially working for the red and black. I had a very tight-knit group of friends. We are still friends. We still meet for lunches. We still talk. Those friendships, and the friendships I made there led to my first job. A guy who graduated from Georgia a year ahead of me was working for the Savannah paper, and he called me up and said, we've got a job opening. Come on up and I'll put in a good word for you.
Well, someone else, it does happen. Here's a really interesting question. Your epilogue is fortuitously dated February 19th, 2020, and includes celebrations and other events that were normal before our world changed with the pandemic. Did you breathe a sigh of relief that it was dated prior to shutdowns and quarantines when these events would have still been plausible?
Yeah. In January, we were planning a 20-city book tour for this book for Hello Summer. And then February, when things shut down, our main concern was scrambling to figure out how do you publish a book in a pandemic. So yeah, and I'm very grateful that who knew it, a year ago, who knew any of this would happen?
Yeah. Well, what advice, this person asked, would you give for someone who wants to write a novel?
Read the kinds of books that you want to write. If, for instance, if you're reading genre fiction, if you're reading if you want to be a mystery writer, a romance writer, fantasy, horror, if you want to write historic fiction, if you want to write nonfiction, read widely. do your homework, learn your craft. I mean, I'd been a newspaper reporter. I'd been a professional writer my whole career. When I went and took, when I was still a reporter, on my own time, I took a week of vacation time to go to a writer's workshop. And I really, that was my secret job, secret second job, was learning the craft, learning how to write, reading everything I could. And then also when I was still a reporter, any writer that was coming through Atlanta on a book tour, I'd get myself assigned to interview them. And at the end of the interview, I would, pick their brains. I was shameless, Monica.
No, that's not shameless. That's smart. Well, the last question is, what is your advice to a writer facing writer's block? Have you ever had writer's block?
I am not allowed to have writer's block. I don't believe in writer's block. I believe in procrastination. I believe in confusion and despair and self-loathing. But the only way out of writer's block is through writer's block. And that is to put your butt in the chair and your fingers on the keyboard. And even, I love Bird by Bird, the writing book. Oh gosh, who's the author? I can't think right now. Anyway, she talks about shitty first drafts.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself permission to write shitty. If you knew how much stuff I throw away. I spent the whole morning reworking a scene that I spent the whole day yesterday writing. There's a reason why your pencil has an eraser and your keyboard has a delete button. So just, even when it's terrible, when you wouldn't want anybody to read it, but the way you get through that is literally you just keep going. And I'm in we call the sloppy middle of my next summer's novel. It's so bogged down, but you just have to keep going.
So you talked about your editor, but do you ever clash with your editor, and how do you solve it?
Yeah, I do clash with her. For one thing, I have great trust in her taste. I respect her taste. And so if I disagree with her, we'll talk it out. Sometimes I'll say, just let me do it this way. And if we both agree that it doesn't work, then I'll try a different solution to it. But so much of it has to do with trust and respect for your editor. And it's not that she's the boss. She's my partner, and we both want the same thing. We both want the best book possible. And so you have to really put your ego aside, and you have to say, this is not her hating me. This is her saying, I think you could do it better. I think there's a better way.
And I guess that the question becomes, how do you choose an editor, or does the editor choose you?
Well, when you're first starting out, you hope an editor will choose you. You'll take any editor you can get. Hopefully, an editor is it's like a marriage. And hopefully you can learn from an editor, and especially when you're first starting out. I had amazing luck with my first editors. Every editor I've had writing fiction has been wonderful, been helpful, taught me a lot, brought me along. And when I was ready to leave my former publisher, HarperCollins, I knew that there was an editor who I wanted to work with, and it was only one editor I would leave for. And fortunately, I'd never met her, but I knew the kind of books she published. And fortunately, she was willing to take me on. So I've been really, if you can't be good, be lucky, but it's better to be both.
It's better to be, and you are both. You are both. Thank you so much for our first book club meeting. I loved it. I learned so much, and I enjoyed talking with you. And the book was just been a pure joy. And I love what one of our people wrote. She said, I've thoroughly enjoyed seeing both Mary Kay Andrews and Monica Kaufman. Thank you. I've read so many of your books. Such a joy to read. See, you bring joy to all of us. Mary Kay, thank you.
Thank you, Monica. My pleasure entirely.
Now we'll give it back to Meredith, who's going to close it out for us.
Go Dogs.
All right.
Go Dogs!
Well, this was just enlightening and lovely. Thank you both. Also, thank you to all of you out there. If anything, I wish we could be in the room together. But I really feel like this was such a treat for me personally and professionally and for all of us. And thank you, Monica and Mary Kay. Both of these graduates that spoke with us tonight both have strong connections to the University of Georgia. Mary Kay has generously donated her collection of works to the UGA library, and we're so grateful for her support. Monica is a great supporter of UGA as a donor, alumnus, and volunteer, and most recently served as an instrumental voice for the College of Education's campaign to rename the college as the Mary Frances Early College of Education, which is, of course, after UGA's first African American graduate. And for all of this, we are extremely and forever grateful. We are looking forward to announcing our next book club selection in the coming days and weeks, along with its accompanying virtual Q&A event between alumni. So stay tuned and go to our website to look for the next date and the next virtual program. And this program, again, is a part of our Between the Pages series, which is an effort to bring our graduates together virtually and engage you virtually, since we can't be together in person, but we're having so much fun with it. So I hope that you'll find another program and join us again. I also encourage you to follow Monica Kaufman Pearson and Mary Kay Andrews. I love following them on their social media handles on Instagram and Facebook. So a little plug for them. And good night, everybody, and thank you so much. Go Dogs.